Hello all, and happy election day. Just wanted to try to get this out before the election was finished. Just had a few thoughts to share. And another interesting corollary with this timeline we've been talking about this time, kind of more for a worldwide view, not just America's timeline. This is actually going to be focusing more on Israel and the Jews' history from Egypt and being delivered by Moses all the way to the Battle of Armageddon. This fulfills the scripture, the last shall be first and the first shall be last, which is going to kind of be the theme of this video. A disclaimer, of course, I don't pretend to know anything more than what is revealed in the scriptures. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and just trying to do my best in studying the signs of the times. And I'm certainly not speaking for the church or sharing anything other than my opinions and views. So with that, let's start with that scripture. This is in 1 Nephi 13, And the time cometh that he shall manifest himself unto all nations, both unto the Jews and also unto the Gentiles. And after he has manifested himself unto the Jews and also the Gentiles, then he shall manifest himself unto the Gentiles and also unto the Jews. And the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. So this idea that the gospel first started with the Jews. Later, you can think of even in the middle, Joseph, through the Book of Mormon, Lehi and his descendants took the gospel to America, and then the Gentiles received it last. And if you really think about it, whoever is listening to this, have received it the very last. So it sets up a chiasmus of the last days where, based on order of who received the gospel, that same order is receiving Christ in the last days. There's all sorts of chiasmus or chiasmai, I don't know how to say that in plural, in the timeline of the world and the Bible. This is more of the scattering and gathering. First Israel through Abraham, some of his posterity was scattered, but they were eventually delivered from Israel in 1300 BC, only to have to wander in the wilderness. Eventually they made it to Canaan, where they set up their country of Israel that split into the northern tribes. The lost 10 tribes were all taken up into Assyria at 721 BC. Manasseh, through the Book of Mormon, and Ephraim as well, they left around 600 BC to America. And then the Jewish nation eventually was destroyed by Babylon in 586 BC, and then again in 70 AD. You can think of Ephraim and the Gentiles as kind of continually being scattered throughout the countries of Europe. Kind of more of a questionable timeline there, but they are certainly the first that received the gathering of the last days. Ephraim has mostly been gathered, all through the 1830s with the missionary efforts of the 12 to Europe. They mostly gathered in Ephraimites. And then the Jewish nation was the second gathered, starting in 1917 with the Balfour Declaration up to 1967 with the Six-Day War. Manasseh followed with the increase of the gospel through the South American countries and the acceptance of primarily the Lamanite descendants. And next will be the lost 10 tribes that will be coming back, maybe in 2024, according to some of our previous calculations. And then eventually all of Israel, all of the Abrahamic covenant will be gathered in through missionary efforts of the last days. And maybe that will be in 2034. We're going to talk about that. So this is something we shared in the first video, how the Book of Mormon is an allegory, and it all matches up with both our latter days timeline as well as our individual timeline that we should be following on an individual basis. But I saw something that was pretty interesting, and I just kind of rearranged this a little bit, that the Jews' timeline, or Israel's timeline, also matches this perfectly. From leaving Egypt and going through the Red Sea would be like pre-earth life, going through the veil, wandering the wilderness. That's the same as the wilderness travel of the Book of Mormon. That's embryology, that entering or leaving the plains of Moab, going down into Jordan would be the first 8 years, crossing the river Jordan, baptism. It goes on. We're going to get through all this, so we don't need to hit it all here, but it basically comes all the way up to the Battle of Armageddon, when Christ comes and delivers them, matching with the coming of Christ in 3 Nephi 11. So let's get into this. This is really interesting to me, and it's all matching up with our individual timeline, which for us should end with the second comforter. So starting with pre-earth life, the format's going to be Book of Mormon here as the template. This will be the Jewish timeline, or Israel's timeline here, and this will be Joseph's, or the Gentiles, our timeline here. So pre-earth life. Lehi and family are in Jerusalem. It used to be good, but basically their situation had become wicked and stagnant. In other words, they weren't able to progress any further, and they were invited to leave by the Lord. There are 3 groups that go out. You can think of this as the noble and great ones with Lehi. There could be a second group, the hesitant and ill-prepared. Those would be the Mulekites that followed, that did not listen to the prophet's voice. And the third group are those that wouldn't listen, that were destroyed. Well, that sounds very similar to our pre-earth life, where we know there's at least 2 of the 3 categories identified, the noble and great ones, and the third that followed Satan and that were left or spiritually destroyed. And if there's 2, there should be 2/3. There should be the extra third. That there's likely a large group of individuals in our pre-earth life that were more ill-prepared, like the Mulekites. So in the Jewish timeline, Israel had been set up in Egypt. It had been good, and of course it became stagnant, and they were in bondage, spiritual bondage for us. They were not progressing, and they were led out of Egypt by the hand of God to new beginnings. Same with us in our timeline. The Gentile church started in Europe with the Catholic Church. Initially, it started good, but became stagnant and wicked. There was limited growth. There was inquisitions, Dark Ages, all sorts of things. But light began to break onto the scene during the Renaissance. So we can see our timeline starting here. There's an idea of a veil, going through the veil and into conception. For the Nephites, leaving the walls of Jerusalem could be the veil. It is interesting that after 3 days they stopped, and it says that they dwelt in a tent. Think of this with conception. They parked their tent next to a river that flowed into the Red Sea. Interesting. Sounds a lot like an umbilical cord leading to a placenta. Then they return for knowledge, the brass plates, and then again for relationships. So is this a hint, of how this works with us? That our embryo, after 3 days, is actually implanting, or close to implanting, next to a river that flows in the Red Sea. And could we be tied to that embryo but still able to move back and forth, to go back for increased knowledge and to solidify relationships that we will need? There's a lot we can learn here, I think. And once they actually move into the wilderness, they don't ever come back. So it's this idea of a quickening, something that Brigham Young said, when the baby moves, or when you feel the baby move, this quickening is when the spirit is tied with the body. Seems to be highlighted here in the Book of Mormon allegory. The same is true for the Israelites. When they cross the Red Sea, it parts like a veil, and the wicked, Egyptians couldn't cross, they couldn't progress. That's like the 1/3 that follows Satan. And then once crossed, they don't ever go back. For us, it's more symbolic, the breaking of the oppressive bounds of the Catholic Church, and the breaking of the darkness of the mind. Once you have developed that testimony during the Renaissance and Reformation, once you're enlightened, you can't go back. So, the next stage for us would be embryology, which would be the wilderness travel. It's interesting that the Nephites travel for 8 years, probably a little bit more. They stayed in the Valley of Lemel likely for around a year. In that year, they were going back and forth, and they all got married, so that takes some time. And then it said that they spent 8 years in the wilderness. The gestational age of a child is 9 months, so there you go. They were fed on raw meat, which would be like being fed raw nutrients from the placenta. They were led to nutrition by God. Kind of talks about how God would lead them in the most fertile parts, and basically it was feeding them, kind of like a mother. It's an interesting symbology there. Liahona, they received that, which has 2 spindles. One is a pointer, which for us could be like the light of Christ. The other was more of a revelator. It said that on it was written a new writing, so that could be the Holy Ghost. Think of this also with the Brother Jared and the barges that they made. They had 2 lights, one in each end, so the light of Christ and the Holy Ghost. And the Liahona, our light that we have, is leading the way. This wilderness travel is hard, and there's lots of fighting with the brothers. You can think about trying to travel your own wilderness with a brother or a sister in embryo. That would be hard. There'd be lots of fighting in the womb. Also, there are deaths along the way, stillbirths, miscarriages, and the such with Ishmael. And then after 8 months or 8 years, they had become strong. Like Nephi says, they became strong like the men and would bear their burdens. So this is all very symbolic of our wilderness travel to this world. The same with the Israelites. They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Interesting gestational age again. Here we are, 40 weeks. It all matches up. They were fed with manna, as just like a neonate is fed also. They had a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of light or fire by night. So there's their Liahona, kind of a cloudy, light of Christ sort of thing here, and more of a light, shining light and fire by the Holy Ghost there. There's lots of contention, and just like Ishmael, Moses kind of sees the end but doesn't quite make it. So some of, this, to me, this is almost indicating that some of our best children, they don't see the light of day. They either die in the womb, they die on the way. Some of God's very best, don't need to enter the promised land. They don't need to enter Canaan. Also in our timeline, the Reformation, where seeds of faith are growing into a new child, which would be the Protestant movement. They have their own growing pains, deaths, torture, Inquisition, and of course divine nourishment as they grew and developed. So next timeline, or next event would be birth, leading to the first 8 years of accountability. It's interesting, the Nephites drop down, and hopefully this isn't too graphic, but just as a baby drops at birth, they drop down from the Arabian Peninsula through what were called wadis. These were valleys where you have a valley on either side, a mountain on either side, and a valley that ran through it that floods during the rainy season. Think of the water breaking there. And it opens up to the land bountiful, where they rest. They have all things prepared for their nourishment, and kind of the whole point of this time in the land bountiful is to prepare a ship of faith to cross the great waters. This is all very symbolic of us coming into our own land bountiful, where it's a time of rest, nourishment, but also preparing a ship of faith to cross the waters of baptism. Israelites, Joshua has now taken over. He leads the people down from the plains of Moab into the Jordan Valley. It says that they lodged there before they passed over for 8 years. Interesting. The Protestant Church also left the wilderness of Europe, or the kind of the Roman Catholic Empire, and they cross the water, very similar, and they find rest in England, where they set up the Church of England, and you know that story. Baptism. This one's pretty obvious. Lehi takes his family across Iriantum, or many waters, in their ship of faith, and this is all after Laman and Lemuel are humbled and repent. So they're following the first principles and ordinances of the gospel. Joshua, with the Israelites, they crossed the parted waters of the Jordan, also an act of faith against the Canaanites, after they had been sufficiently humbled in the wilderness. And then the waters close after the Ark of the Covenant passes over. So they take these covenants through the waters into the promised land being, for us, the church. And the same for our timeline. We have the Puritans, or the Separatists, that actually called themselves saints. I thought that was interesting. They leave the now kind of stagnant and oppressive land of England. They weren't growing anymore in England. They needed to cross the waters in a symbolic act of baptism on the Mayflower. And they left here in 1623. We're coming up on... I did some math wrong here, but someone will have to correct me on that. I think it was 1620. Let's change that, because it was 400 years ago this year. That's an interesting timeline as well. So they enter into the promised land. For us, this is covenant church membership. Nephites, they enter into the promised land. It say they bring their seeds of the old world, which grow abundantly in this new land. They have animals for the use of man. So think of this as, bringing your talents that grow within the church programs, these animals that are there provided to help things move along and grow. Also, this is the first mention of Nephi keeping a record. So, a plug for good time for journaling. There's all sorts of lessons to learn. And basically, as we go through this, wherever you are or whoever you're working with, look at these chapters in the Book of Mormon or even in the Bible. There are a lot of lessons there, how to help people progress along this covenant path. So the land of Canaan for the Israelites, they enter in. It's very fertile. This is the land promised to Israel through the covenant, and there are blessings and cursings associated with the covenant land. We're going to get into that. For the Gentiles, the pilgrims arrive. They have, Thanksgiving, and eventually they start to prosper and drive out the wicked posterity of the Lamanites. So it's this same idea of when you are righteous, there are blessings. When you are unrighteous, like the posterity of the Lamanites, there are cursings associated with the covenant land. This is something that our prophet instructed us to study in our last conference. He said, as you study your scriptures during the next 6 months, I encourage you to make a list of all that the Lord has promised He will do for covenant Israel. I think you will be astounded. Ponder these promises, talk about them with your family and friends, then live and watch for these promises to be fulfilled in your own life. So we're going to go through that just because it is kind of driving everything that we're talking about. A lot of this is found in Deuteronomy 28, although it's not extensive, but that is a great place to start. These are the blessings given to covenant Israel if they will hearken diligently to the voice of the Lord and observe to do all His commandments, not to go aside from any of the words which I have commanded thee this day to the right hand or the left, to go after other gods and serve them. So these are the blessings. And He will set thee on high above all. Yeah. You'll be blessed in your city, in your field, and blessed in the fruit of your body, the fruit of your ground, the fruit of the flocks, blessed in thy basket and store. You'll be blessed when you come in and blessed when you go out. Your enemies will be smitten and afraid, and blessed in your storehouses. Basically, all that thou settest thine hand unto will be blessed. And you will be established as a holy people unto the Lord, and be called by the name of the Lord. Think of what we talked about last time, having that sealing in your forehead. You will have opened unto you His good treasure. The heaven will give rain in its season. You will lend and not borrow. You will be the head and not the tail. And you will be above and not beneath. So this sounds great. This is what we want. But you have to not just keep the commandments, but also be able to diligently listen and hear and follow the voice of the Lord, which is the Spirit and revelation. So not as easily said, or not as easily done as said. And there are cursings if you will not hearken to the voice of the Lord or observe to keep His commandments. These are the curses. Kind of the same, just an opposite. Cursed in your land, body, flocks. You will have a cursing, a vexation, and rebuke until you are destroyed. Pestilence, consumption, fever. The heaven will be brass, the earth will be iron. The rain will be as powder and dust. This sounds horrible. You'll be smitten and scattered. These sound really bad too. The botch of Egypt. I don't even know what that is. The emerods, the itch. I definitely don't want the itch. You will have madness and blindness. Locusts will eat your grain and your trees and your fruit, and your worms will eat the vine. This is where it gets really sad. Your children will be slaves, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long. You will be mad for the sight of thine eyes, like you don't even want to see. There was a spot where it said that you will long for the night in the day, and when night comes you will long for the day. You just want it to be over. This botch that cannot be healed. And then he will bring a nation that basically will eat everything up. Because you serve not the Lord thy God with joyfulness and with gladness of heart for the abundance of all things, then you'll need to serve other gods. He will bring a nation against thee from far, whose tongue thou shalt not understand. And when we're going through this, don't just think Israel. This is our timeline. This is America's future, because we have not served the Lord thy God with joyfulness. You'll bring a nation of a fierce countenance. A stranger will be above, and you will be brought low. He will be the head, and you will be the tail. He will besiege thee in all thy gates, and thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters. Ugh, it's horrible. The Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Well, that's interesting. They were brought into Canaan with ships. Not with ships, but across the Red Sea from Egypt. Here is basically saying that covenant relationship is being reversed. He's going to bring them back into Egypt with ships, sold into their enemies. And if this is all, if you will not observe to do the words of this law that are written in this book, that thou mayest fear this glorious and fearful name, the Lord thy God. So that might sound harsh, but God is more interested in your salvation than in your comfort. He's more interested in helping his children repent and turn. And sometimes when we are sufficiently hardened and ripened in iniquity, this kind of stuff is the only thing that'll bring you back. So that's kind of the covenant that we've been instructed to study, the pros and cons. It's going to dictate a lot of what we're going to talk about. So the next step after entering into the covenant land is, for the Nephites, they enter into promised land, and basically right away the sides are drawn up and the family splits. Nephi leaves his brothers. It says they prosper exceedingly. They reap again in abundance. This is them taking advantage of the covenant. The Lamanites are getting the cursings. They are cut off from the presence of the Lord, and basically a war begins between the two. For us during this time, it could be thought of as bullying. There's a lot of talk about industry with the Nephites. That could be hobbies. The first mention of temple worship. Interesting that during this time it is the first time we can go to the temple. So it's all matching up great. And of course you get into the Isaiah chapters, which will be moving into more advanced studies from the teaching and plainness that Nephi does. So we're moving on to high school. For the Israelites, the schooling of Israel in Canaan, you've got the dichotomy of Jericho versus Ai. It sounds like something out of what's that movie? I'll have to think about it. Basically, it sets the tone for almost the next 1,000 years, when the righteous are blessed, like with Jericho, and when they are wicked, like with Ai, the castle of Ai. That's what I'm referencing, but I can't think of the name. The Holy Grail, the Knights of the Holy Grail, Monty Python. And then when they're wicked, like with Ai, that was when there was, I think, just one guy that had stolen some silver. They were just totally destroyed. So the Lord was making a point right from the get-go. Be righteous and you'll see miracles. Deviate from that and you're going to be destroyed. And then you've got kind of the same idea of this choosing sides, and the wheat and the tares. Israel eventually splits away from Judah and creates the two nations. All during this time you have warnings of the prophets, Isaiah at this time, Isaiah chapters. So for us, the 13 colonies have been established, and they are prospering. They are, industry and hobbies and covenant keeping, and of course, same pattern. Battle lines are drawn. You have the Revolutionary War that we are divinely delivered. A great book on that is The Washington Hypothesis, if you've ever read that. Eventually freedom is established, religion thrives, but it's kind of a confused, mixed up kind of conglomerate. And at this time, Joseph Smith is called as a first prophet. He has his first vision. Think about, at this time we're reading in the Isaiah chapters, Isaiah 6, where Isaiah is caught up into heaven and sees God and Christ. It's all very symbolic of our time with Joseph Smith. And at this time, the ultimate sides are drawn with covenant Israel for the church and Satan gaining power. There's a chapter on, or a section on final fatherly counsel. After you've finished high school, you can expect to get some final fatherly counsel. Nephi would be the kind of the quintessential father of the Book of Mormon. He teaches of the covenant. He prophesies of the future Jewish and Nephite civilizations. He basically prepares us for the road ahead by teaching about the restoration and the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, and gives the attitudes of the Gentiles in the future for the future gospel message. So he's basically kind of almost given like an MTC, a pre-MTC, teaching here. The Book of Mormon, the restoration, what kind of attitudes you might expect. And then he follows up. He says he must teach about the doctrine of Christ, which in essence is, we all know it: faith, repentance, baptism, and the gift of the Holy Ghost. But it's a little more complex than that. To actually obtain the gift of the Holy Ghost, one has to follow the Son with full purpose of heart, acting no hypocrisy and no deception before God, but with real intent, repenting of your sins and witnessing unto the Father that ye are willing to take upon you the name of Christ. And behold, then shall you receive the Holy Ghost. So this is something that doesn't necessarily come just because you've had hands placed on your head. You've got to follow the Son, full purpose of heart, real intent, really, really repenting, coming with a broken heart and a contrite spirit. We've got some final fatherly counsel with the Israelites. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lehi, they're all kind of can be thought of as fathers, pleading with the children of Israel to repent and be blessed. Joseph Smith at this time also receives the Book of Mormon, which would be our own fatherly counsel written for our day to teach us. So it's all matching there. Next section would be leaving the nest. After you finish high school, it's time to get out and get your feet wet. The Nephites, they basically kind of stuck around too long, over 400 years. Was that 400 years again? And things start to stagnate. The people have become wicked, and King Mosiah was warned of the Lord that he should flee out of the land of Nephi, and as many as would hearken unto the voice of the Lord also depart out of the land with him into the wilderness. And they go over to Zarahemla, where there's a people prepared for them to accept them. So think of this as, if you stick around town too long, you're not moving on to the next step. Things can stagnate, and the Lord is trying to lead you out to the next things. Degenerate Israel is taken captive into Assyria, so you lose the lost 10 tribes here, who actually start their own timeline we can talk about. And then the Jews follow suit. They are taken into Babylon around 600, and that's how Israel is spread all over the world. And they didn't want to leave, but they were brought kicking and screaming. The church, so we're back to our church timeline. We have a prophet, we have the Book of Mormon. The church has been established and is growing in the east, but has now come under significant persecution. The church in general leaves New York and goes to Kirtland, Ohio, where Sidney Rigdon has a people prepared to receive the gospel via the golden plates. This is very similar to King Mosiah coming to Zarahemla, where they have a people prepared to receive the brass plates. So I just love how this is all matching up. So just to do a quick plug for the new timeline of the lost 10 tribes. Israel had basically broken the covenant, received all the curses, and they were carried into Assyria. We're told that a group of the 10 tribes took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. This is from 2nd Ezra. It's the 10 tribes that leave the area of Assyria, which can be thought of now as their new pre-mortality. They go through their wilderness travel, and they come to the Euphrates River now, which in like manner the Lord parts, letting them pass through in a symbolic rebaptism. It said that they entered into Euphrates by the narrow places of the river, for the Most High then showed signs of them and held still the flood till they were passed over. Very interesting how the Lord uses these true events to teach kind of a deeper purpose. And we kind of lose the timeline from here, but we do know they make it to the end, kind of the final stages that we all want to get to. They come into the presence of Christ, they are translated, and in Jeremiah it says that they become his battle axe. So, more to come. There's a interesting little section in the Book of Mormon that could be termed failure to launch. In the story of Zeniff, he returns to the land of Nephi, basically going back to his old home. And for us that would be, say we leave out to college and say, no, this is too hard, I'm going to go back home and sleep in the basement or whatever it is. If that happens, you'll be fighting off Lamanites the rest of your days. You have all these Lamanites that are there waiting for you, and some fall prey to them. Noah, interestingly enough, he falls prey to the word of wisdom. He's a wine bibber, and he has multiple wives, so word of wisdom and chastity. And that leads to spiritual death. There's a local prophet, Abinadi, who's raised up and calls them to repentance, who is also then martyred. And converted Alma takes the church to Helaman, where he is persecuted to the point where he becomes humble and is delivered back to Zarahemla, where this all should have stayed. Compare that to Limhi, who tries to deliver himself preemptively and is humbled again and again and again until he learns the lesson. For Israel, King Cyrus of Persia, after taking over Babylon, basically facilitates the Jews returning to their homeland. It's interesting, they say that they used the rubble of the old wall to rebuild the temple and the walls, the rubble of our old lives and be returning to. They have to deal with Samaritans and the other inhabitants that try to hinder their progress, and basically they become wicked again, and Christ is called to bring them to repentance. Well, that matches very well with Abinadi, who also was called to be a prophet and call the people into repentance, and is killed. For our timeline, the church moves into Independence, Missouri, which can be thought of as the ultimate original home where Adam was. So kind of like going back. They are persecuted and chastened because they did not hearken to the commandments, and they have to flee Jackson County to Clay County or far west. Also have the apostasy in Kirtland at this time. Joseph Smith is called to go comfort the saints and condemn the wicked Missourians with Zion's camp. He's eventually imprisoned and later martyred, just like Christ, just like Abinadi. This is all matching up with the timeline. The church eventually moves to Nauvoo, where they are also persecuted, and Brigham Young ultimately directs the migration from Nauvoo to Utah. Think of Brigham Young as Alma, the convert of Abinadi that takes over the church. He moves the church to Helaman. Brigham Young moves the church to Nauvoo. He eventually needs to even leave Helaman, that seemed like a nice place with lots of water around. Go to Zarahemla, just like Brigham Young needs to go to Utah or Zion. There's a rebellious stage, just like us. When we move out, or even in the years leading up to it, many of us will go through a rebellious phase where we are spreading our wings. There's great chapters in the Book of Mormon about that. After Alma comes back to Zarahemla, it talks about his sons and the sons of Mosiah, and his son, Alma the younger, rebelling and being the very vilest of sinners, trying to destroy the church and lead astray the people. And the Jewish nation certainly has had their rebellious phase. They were spread throughout the world after they rebelled against Christ, and it's been about 2,000 years of rebellion against our God. But through that pain, hearts are being softened. So this rejection of Christ for the last 2,000 years or so, this is really what puts the Jewish nation from the first to the last. Whereas the Gentiles didn't have such a long rebellion. For our timeline, after the martyrdom, there was a succession crisis where some of the very best, like Sidney Rigdon, rebelled against the 12 and apostatized and fragmented the church. The Lord intervened. We know the story about how Brigham Young spoke as Joseph Smith, and the mantle of the prophet was declared. So that was can be thought of as our rebellious phase, where many rebelled. There is a pre-mission conversion, where just like before we go on a mission, hopefully we would receive a conversion. Alma the younger, sons of Mosiah, we know the story. They are visited by the Spirit, or by an angel, and Alma repents of his sins and is born of the Spirit. And he's told that all mankind, yea, all men, women, and nations, kindreds, tongues, and people must be born again, yea, born of God, changed from their carnal and fallen state to a state of righteousness, being redeemed of God, becoming his sons and daughters, and thus they become new creatures, and unless they do this, they can in no wise inherit the kingdom of God. So that is the conversion that we are all looking for before leaving on a mission. Israelites, after years of bondage, death, humiliation, and in particular the Holocaust. Jewish people were probably the most humble people on the earth. And for us, the true humbling and conversion of the early saints came as they subsequently crossed the plains. You've probably heard this quote from one of the members of the William Martin Handcart Company. He said, "The price we paid to become acquainted with God was a privilege to pay, and I'm thankful I was able to come." So, next we're coming into our missionary work, leading to the gathering. In the Book of Mormon, after the conversion of Alma Younger and the sons of Mosiah, they naturally want to go spread the gospel, and they are called to go to the apostates with Alma and inactive saints, and then also to members that aren't saints, the Lamanites, non-members, with the sons of Mosiah. We have great lessons there: perseverance, trial, service, faith, sacrifice, and the kind of end goal and purpose is to gather them all into Zarahemla. So, for the Israelites, after the World Wars, the Jews were given back their homeland. First, from the British, after World War I, they have the Balfour Declaration of 1917. Millions started to gather, and independence was eventually declared in 1948. But they also have an increase in Arab aggression at that time. For us, this has basically been the last 170 years of the church. It's been a missionary church. After we were established in Utah, we go out and try to convert and bring in Israel. Particularly, we initially found success in Europe and England, where Ephraim was being gathered first, being the last to be dispersed, and then Manasseh eventually from the South American countries amongst ancestors, or from the Lamanites. Okay, so we're into the war chapters. Hopefully this isn't boring anyone. I think it's interesting. The war chapters can be thought of as our war with the world and developing our careers in temporal security. War chapters are all about temporal security. Have stories of the need to prepare, the need to stay pure, cleanse the inner vessel, divine intervention, in particular from the 2000 stripling warriors, and basically the covenant that God will fight our battles if we will keep to it. For us individually, these are great chapters to study on, strategizing and preparing, and sometimes pulling all-nighters. They pulled all-nighters, kind of like I'm doing tonight. So this is good chapters for those that are still building their careers and establishing temporal security. For the Israelites, we have this is basically after they had gathered in June of 1963, 67, I should have put the year. Egypt were mobilizing their military, and Israel led a surprise Air Force attack on June 5th, which decimated their basically entire military and Air Force, and they went on to take Jordan, the Golan Heights, basically fought off the entire Arab nations, and it took 6 days. That's why they call it the 6-Day War. And we thought of as God fought for 6 days. On the 7th day he rested. So this was a amazing event and establishment of temporal security for Israel. Certainly the hand of God was involved. For us, the war chapters have been kind of perpetual since the saints left Utah. We have, of course, the Utah War for us, but then also the Mexican-American War, the Civil War, Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II. Basically, the same thing applies when America keeps the covenant. As a whole in general, they are blessed and successful. The Civil War, we were losing it for a large portion until Abraham Lincoln made it all mostly about freeing the slaves. And once he did that, then we began to win. There's another great book by the same author, Tim Ballard, called The Lincoln Hypothesis. Very good. And then, alternatively, when the majority are breaking the covenant, it leads to failure. You can think of Korea, Vietnam. That's probably the best example. This is right during the free love hippie movement of the 60s. We didn't do too great with Vietnam. So, and then for our day, the war on terror, this never-ending perpetual war with Islam. It's just unwinnable. Once you've developed that temporal security through the war chapters and establishing your career, we tend to have this tendency to go to pride. It's this pride cycle. You're blessed and you become prideful. This is our modern day for both the timelines. This is kind of where we are meeting. In the Book of Mormon, after the war chapters, the people become rich and prideful. There's this great political battle in Helaman 1, very important for our day. Secret combinations are coming into power, and judges are being assassinated. Interesting. Think Ezra's eagle there. This is one of the reasons I want to get this out today on election day. So this would be Israel today. They have been blessed with temporal security and prosperity. I can't speak for the Jewish nation, but they might be following the same pride cycle, relying on the arm of flesh. You know about the Iron Dome that seems to protect them from a lot of missiles. They certainly excel in science and technology. Many are extremely wealthy. We have this new peace treaty with the Abraham Accord. So things look really good for them. They've been very blessed, and they might be getting a little prideful again. We certainly are there. America and the church are at the peak of an unparalleled prosperity, as well as, unfortunately, pride. This is, I believe, from Nephi. He said, no, this is from Christ. At that day when the Gentiles shall sin against my gospel, and shall reject the fullness of my gospel, and shall be lifted up in the pride of their hearts above all nations. That hurts. That's us. And above all the people of the whole earth. And if they shall do these things, and shall reject the fullness of my gospel, behold, saith the Father, I will bring the fullness of my gospel from among them. And I think we saw this happen, actually. On March 18th of this year, Moroni dropped his trumpet in the earthquake in Salt Lake. And then 2 weeks later, during conference, the Lord literally starts preaching his own sermons at conference with his proclamation to the world. Actually a very important document where the Lord is preaching his own sermon there, and he's going to follow that up. After the testimony that we have given cometh the testimony of earthquakes, cometh the testimony of thunderings, lightnings, tempests, waves of the sea heaving themselves beyond their bounds. This stuff's starting to happen. We just had a major earthquake in Turkey. Waves of the sea heaving themselves beyond their bounds. There was a large tsunami. Quite a few people died. The beginning of this setback. So once you become prideful like that, you are due for humiliation, to have this humility offense that we've talked about in other videos. The secret combination with the Nephites at this time. They stir up the people after the political election. There is a coalition of dissenters and Lamanites that invade the land, and initially there's a first strike on the capital, and eventually they take the majority of their possessions. Moronihah and the armies, they try to fight back, and they are able to regain about half of their land, but no more. This is coming tribulation, so now we're getting into future events. We just passed the past. So in typical last first and first last style, the tribulations and humiliations that are prophesied to come to Israel are after the Gentiles, with the coming Antichrist. And so now our timeline is first, are primed and ripe for a 5-month civil war, I believe at least, which one would think would be the fifth angel in Revelation 9, silence in heaven currently ending. It says about, and there's different thoughts, October 31st to February 4th, but probably no later, somewhere in here. We know that is followed by an earthquake, angels 1 through 4. And don't forget this scripture, upon my house it shall begin. First among those among you, saith the Lord, who have professed to know my name, and have not known me, and have blasphemed against me in the midst of my house. It's kind of scary. So Helaman 4. I just thought that this would be interesting or important to go through to remind us of why this is coming. This great loss of the Nephites and the Gentiles, and the great slaughter which was among them, would not have happened had it not been for their wickedness and their abomination which was among them. Yea, and it was among those who also professed to belong to the church of God. And as because of the pride of their hearts, because of their exceeding riches, and because of this their great wickedness and their boastings in their own strength, they were left in their own strength. Therefore they did not prosper, but were afflicted and smitten and driven before the Lamanites until they had lost possession of almost all their lands. Foreboding. Here's some more. Because of their iniquity of the church, or the church had begun to dwindle, and they began to disbelieve in the spirit of prophecy, the spirit of revelation, and the judgments of God did stare them in the face. They began to be weak like their brethren. The Spirit did no more preserve them. The Lord did cease to preserve them by His miraculous and matchless power, because they've fallen into a state of unbelief and awful wickedness. Okay. Exciting. But just like we've learned in the other timelines, the setback or humility offense leads to repentance and return to covenants. In our own personal timeline, if we have fallen into a pride cycle due to our temporal security, you can be guaranteed you've got a setback coming. I can speak from personal experience. Eventually it does hopefully lead you to repentance and refocusing on the covenants, which is what Nephi and Lehi do in our Book of Mormon timeline. They focus on the covenant, they go on a mission to reclaim their lost brethren. Certainly they were likely drawing from this promise in Alma. It says, and now, as the preaching of the word had a great tendency to lead the people to do that which was just, it had more powerful effect on the minds of the people than the sword or anything else. So they are going to go try that out. For the Israelites, we have now, in the latter days, 2 witnesses, two, that are called to testify to and protect the land of Israel from the Antichrist for 3.5 years. It said that he will give power to the 2 witnesses. They shall prophesy 1,260 days, or 3.5 years, clothed in sackcloth. And as a result of the beginning of sorrows, the church will also be humbled and prepared to receive a latter-day Pentecost. I'm not saying that prophetically or anything, it just seems to be common knowledge that you need to be brought low before you can be brought high. And Isaiah is prophesying about it as well. It says, "When the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem," or our blood, "in that day shall the branch of the Lord be beautiful and glorious, the fruit of the earth excellent and comely. To them that are escaped of Israel, they that are left in Zion and remain in Jerusalem shall be called holy." So, we need to have the filth washed away, not just from the daughters, but from the sons too, and our blood purged. It is coming. And hopefully leads to this. Individually, that once we have that broken heart, contrite spirit, we come to the Lord and have a re-baptism by fire. Hopefully this one sticks. This is akin to our pre-mission conversion, like with Alma the Younger. But I like this description even better. With the Book of Mormon, Nephi and Lehi are imprisoned as they're faced with death. In the very last moments when it looks really dark, fire engulfs them all, and it did harm them not. And the Holy Spirit of God did come down from heaven and did enter into their hearts, and they were filled as if with fire and could speak forth marvelous words. This is what we need to be working towards as a people. If you haven't had this yet, this is the fulfillment of the gift of the Holy Ghost when you are baptized by fire and the Spirit, like Christ taught Nicodemus. It's the only way to get into heaven. A man must be born of water and of the Spirit. So back to Israel's timeline, we are still with the two witnesses. They are protecting Israel with fire, interestingly enough. It says, "Fire proceedeth out of their mouth and devoureth their enemies." For us, this would be the promised coming day of Pentecost, which I thought might be next May 23rd, which is the day of Pentecost, when Nephi and also our prophet prophesied that the power of the Lamb of God would descend upon the church of the land, upon the covenant people of the Lord, and arming them with righteousness and with the power of God. So it's this arming with righteousness that would be our own baptism by fire. And this needs to happen probably first on an individual level before it can happen more on a generalized level with Zion. They then go on a lifelong mission. Once we have our own baptism by fire, it becomes our lifelong mission to want to share what we've learned and try to help others as well. That's exactly what Nephi, Lehi, and the 300 in the jail do. They set out and they convert the majority of the invading army, and they were all convinced of them, and they did yield up on the Nephites the land of their possession. The Spirit did have more strength than the sword. For Israel, the two prophets that are raised up in the Jewish nation in the last days are to prophesy to the Jews after they are gathered and have built the city of Jerusalem in the land of their fathers. So that is basically, their mission. It's not just to protect them, but it is to prophesy to them and to teach them. For us, after this coming day of Pentecost, we will be called to go and gather in Zion. President Nelson has taught us something similar. Turbulent times are opportunities for us to thrive spiritually. They are times when our influence can be much more penetrating than in calmer times. And this will fulfill the scripture where we transition from many fishers that fish the people and throwing out a big wide net and just seeing what we bring in. He says after this period, which we are finishing, I will send for many hunters. This is the second wave of missionaries. And they shall hunt them from every mountain and from every hill out of the holes of the rocks. This is us likely being called to the invading armies of America. Just like Nephi and Lehi went out and converted their invaders, just like the sons of Mosiah went out and converted their enemies. And that led to the spilling of the blood of the anti-Nephi Lehites, sealing the destruction of the wicked. So, it is amazing. We are following this pattern perfectly. The next great event in our own lives and in the Book of Mormon, and this is probably happening concomitantly with baptism by fire and your mission. It's this development of power in the priesthood. Now Nephi, he goes out, he preaches, he has the spirit of prophecy, he talks about the judge that had been slain, and basically in the face of great opposition, he does all things that the Lord had asked him. He says that the Lord comes to him and says, Thou shalt not ask that which is contrary to my will. He knows that Nephi won't ask anything contrary, so he gives him power that whatsoever ye shall seal on earth shall be sealed in heaven, and whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. For Israel, their timeline, it's still with the two witnesses, where he says, I will give power unto my two witnesses to shut up heaven, that it rain not. That's exactly what Nephi did at this part in the Book of Mormon timeline. And smite the earth with plagues and whatnot. For us, this is the power that we need to obtain, and the power that we need to be worthy of. We're back to the promise in 1 Nephi 14 that after the Spirit is poured out on the people, they are armed with righteousness, but they're also armed with, there it is, the power of God in great glory. I'm missing a quote. Okay. We're on to becoming Zion. After our baptism by fire, we're developing power in the priesthood. We're trying to spread the word, and as an individual, we are trying to become Zion. And as we do so, you can rest assured that you will be facing increasing opposition, because the wicked, they don't like it when you shine a light on that wickedness. It's hard, and opposition is going to increase, just like in the Book of Mormon. After this great outpouring of the Spirit, and they're all converted, secret combinations increase, opposition increases. Samuel Lamanite, he is a good example for us at this part in the timeline of needing to be bold, powerful, trusting in being protected, being taught by angels, having the spirit of prophecy. There's this little quote in Helaman 16, angels appeared unto men and taught them great tidings of great joy. And eventually, the need to gather together in one. This is now into 3rd Nephi, kind of a shout out for a call out, with temporal provisions in Zarahemla, which for us would be Zion. And during the 3.5 years that the Jews are being assaulted under the protection of the two witnesses, it talks about everyone else has fainted, but these two are bull in the net. And they're full of the fury of the Lord, rebuke of thy God. They are fighting the fight against the opposition. The time is coming when those who do not obey the Lord will be separated from those who do. This is from April of this year by President Nelson. And then he references D&C 86, where it says that the tares choke the wheat and drive the church into the wilderness. So he's saying the time is coming that the wheat is going to be separated from the tares, and because of the tares, because of the wickedness in the world, it drives the church into the wilderness. Think about Revelation 12, where the dragon, it says, persecuted the woman, and she was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and a half time, 3.5 years, from the face of the serpent. So these are kind of early 3rd Nephi chapters that we're all going to be in. And on an individual basis, as you are trying to become Zion, you will come to this, the trial of faith. This is not fun, but basically Joseph Smith taught that everyone that wants to progress along the covenant path, if you really want to get to the end, the Lord will try you, He will test you. He said He will tug it and pull at your heartstrings. He will try you just like Abraham. And in the Book of Mormon Timeline, this comes from Jacob the Antichrist, who comes on the scene, destroys the government. The tribes unite against him, and drive him into the northernmost part of the country. This is all very prophetic of our day. This is then followed by natural destructions, a great storm, earthquakes, tidal waves, fires, and darkness. All representative of the trial of faith, where your life falls apart. And this happens. This does happen. But it's okay, because the Lord is in charge. So for the Israelites, their major trial of faith happens when the Antichrist kills the 2 witnesses. After they finish their testimony, he overcomes them, and then the city is ravaged for 3.5 days. And I can't imagine, after 3.5 years of trying to get in there, what they're going to do for 3.5 days. But Zechariah teaches that 2 parts shall be cut off and die. So 2/3 have been killed, and there's a 1/3 left that is hiding, running, and will eventually be protected. The Antichrist in America, so back to our timeline, he has basically taken over Eurasia and the armies. He is coming for the last remaining holders of the Constitution. And Revelations, the serpent casting out his mouth, water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away. He takes over the temple with the abomination of desolation. He comes right up to the walls of the New Jerusalem. This is all very symbolic with what happened in 2 Kings and Chronicles with Hezekiah, and the blasphemy that he does. Don't believe Hezekiah. Come follow me, and I'll bring you to a land of milk and honey. This is a trial of faith, and we are going to be praying and fasting for that deliverance. But after your trial of faith, you can expect to have something like this happen. Your calling and election. So with the Book of Mormon, it says that the righteous are preserved and the Antichrist is burned in the great city Jekobach. And then through the darkness, a voice is heard, the voice of Christ. This voice calling them to come unto him. And he says, how oft have I, and how oft would I, and how oft will I gather you as a hen gathers her chickens under her wings. You thought you were cast off. You thought life was horrible and was over, and that there was nothing left. But I'm still there. I'm still going to gather you. And that eventually that darkness gives way to light. That wailing ceases. The mourning is turned to joy. The lamentations to praise and thanksgiving. This does come after the 3 days of darkness for us individually, came for the Nephites. It's going to come for the Israelites when the two witnesses are resurrected. After, there it is, 3 days, they hear a voice saying, "Come up hither." They ascend up into heaven. Christ comes. There's a great earthquake that splits them out, destroys the Antichrist and his army with the fire of his glory. This is all matching. And same for us, as we are fasting and praying for deliverance, which I think will be the night of Tisha B'Av. There's a little typo. The Antichrist army will be bearing down on us, and the next day the city of Enoch and the lost 10 tribes come to deliver us. This is where comes down, the mousetrap splits the earth helps the woman, opens her mouth, and swallows the flood that the dragon cast out. You can watch my other videos for that. So this is from my last video, just a refresher, where December 21st is this harvest sign of the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, and 5 months later, after a 5-month war, would be Day of Pentecost. And then from December 18th, you'd have the taking away of the daily sacrifice. You add 1290, the days of Daniel, and you get to June 30th, which would be the abomination of desolation. And then August 13th is Tisha B'Av, which is the fast commemorating the destruction of the temple in Israel, and would be the day that the Antichrist is at our doors. And the very next day, to fulfill the 1335 Daniel days, is the blessed day of the coming of the city of Enoch and the lost 10 tribes, the day of deliverance. So this is all working up to what is called the second comforter for us individually, something that Joseph Smith taught, that after a man has been tried and the Lord sees that he will follow him in everything that he asks him to do, through the trial of faith, it will be his privilege to have the second comforter, Jesus Christ, come and teach him. And for the Nephite timeline, about a year later, the destructions were in the first month, and then it says in the ending they had great blessings shown unto them. It says that the righteous gathered to the temple. So this is interesting. Those that made the temple the focus for that year, they're the ones that hear now Heavenly Father's voice testify of the Son. "Behold, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased, in whom I have glorified my name. Hear ye him." And then Christ comes, invites all to come unto him, that they may thrust your hands into my side, and also that ye may feel the prints of the nails in my hands and in my feet, that ye may know that I am the God of Israel. This is what we want on an individual basis. This is what the Book of Mormon is all leading up to, teaching us that this is possible, that this is desired, this is what he wants for us, this is bringing us home. When it happened to the brother Jared, it said that he was redeemed from the fall. That's what he wants. He wants us redeemed. For the Jews, the Israelites, he split them out, and the same thing. They come unto him, they say, "What are these wounds in thy hands and in thy feet?" And I will say unto them, "These wounds are the wounds with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. I am he who was lifted up, I am Jesus that was crucified, I am the Son of God." And in like manner, first to us, Christ will come to the Gentiles, fulfilling the scripture, "The last shall be first, the first shall be last," on his wedding day, which we talked about, I believe would be Tu B'Av, August 19th, is a Jewish holiday of love, similar to Valentine's, a day of weddings, and the very next Sunday after the the city of Enoch and the lost 10 tribes come to save us, the sun goes down at the stroke of midnight. The bridegroom comes to his bride. All those that are confirmed in the covenant, the wise virgins that are invited into the wedding feast. And this is, exactly 7 years from the first eclipse. You've had 7 years to confirm the covenant. And, you can go on and add the 2,300 Daniel days. And it ends April 6th, 2027, which is when this would be happening. So, it is beautiful to me how this all fits. I just wanted to read a little from D&C 45. It's already probably been a while. But it says, the remnant, this is us, shall be gathered unto this place. So the remnant that make it through the first woe shall be gathered, there's the call out, into this place. And then they shall look for me. We're going to be looking for him because we are going to be in dire straits. And behold, I will come, and they will see me in the clouds of heaven, clothed with power and great glory. Now this isn't the final second coming. This is before. This is when Christ comes to the New Jerusalem. Those that do not watch for me will be cut off. And watch and be ready, the wise virgins that are prepared. This is the second appearance of Christ. The first would be at Armageddon, but this is him coming to Zion. And before the arm of the Lord shall fall, now here it is falling, okay, so keep that in mind. An angel shall sound his trump, and the saints that have slept shall come forth to meet me in the cloud. That's really interesting. I hadn't really put that together, but it sounds like the first resurrection, at least on a large scale, is actually starting here with us over here. And then shall the arm of the Lord fall on the nations, and then shall the Lord set his foot upon the mount, which is the third appearance of Christ coming to Jerusalem. So he actually puts this resurrection event before him coming to Jerusalem. Very interesting. So I might need to take another look at D&C 88. So he goes on to say, and at that day, when I shall come in my glory, shall the parable be fulfilled which I spake concerning the 10 virgins. For they that are wise and have received the truth, so these are the wise ones, who have received the truth, have taken the Holy Spirit for their guide, and have not been deceived. Verily I say unto you, they shall not be hewn down and cast into the fire by the day. And you wonder why President Nelson says that you will not spiritually survive if you can't hear the Holy Ghost. That is what this is all about. This is what makes the difference between the goats and the lambs, and those on the right and the left, and the wise and the foolish. Those that can receive the truth and take the Holy Spirit for their God and not be deceived. It is so important. Nothing is more important. The Lord will come and be our King and Lawgiver. So, that is the timeline. Now, not to belabor the point, but there's actually one more timeline, just to finish this out. And it actually starts with Adam. So, Adam, in the Garden of Eden, pre-earth life, he has a flaming sword that kicks him out, and think of that as the veil. He's kicked out into the telestial world. This is your wilderness travel. He kind of makes this southward migration. We know the city of Enoch was more south, most likely in the Gulf of Mexico. It's kind of like coming down, and the first 8 years, the flood matches perfectly with baptism. Then you've after the flood, you've got the posterity of Noah. Many had become wicked, and Abraham in particular was righteous, wanting the promises made to the fathers. This is like the school and choosing sides, the family splitting, and the apostasy of the Egyptians, Revolutionary War. It's all matching. You have a leaving the nest phase where Abraham is brought into Canaan. You've got Isaac and Jacob there as well. And then kind of this returning back to Egypt with Joseph. It's like the return under Cyrus, going to Missouri for us. You've got rebellious years in Egypt. They had become prideful initially, and then were under bondage. Same with Moses. We're going to kind of transition to Moses here, where he was very prideful as the Prince of Egypt. But you have this conversion like the Alma the Younger with Moses. And you got a mission phase where Moses is called on a mission to free the slaves. He has kind of this temporal security career war with the world phase that matches the war chapters with the 10 plagues and eventual deliverance. And once they're delivered, they fall back into the pride cycle. People rebel, fear, they look back to Egypt, and they fail. Well, basically at this point, the Lord says, all right, well, you failed. You're not going to be able to progress up here until you learn the first lessons. And he kicks him back to this. All right, think of Egypt and the Red Sea now as leaving prayer of life and wandering in the wilderness. And so on and so forth, as we talked about. But Moses continues to progress. He can be said to have had baptism by fire, empowering the priesthood. He already kind of had that before, but he goes up on the Mount of Sinai, where certainly similar things happening. Becomes a Zion individual. Through that, he has great opposition, trial of faith, as he has to suffer with his people for 40 years. And he eventually is brought up into the mount right before they entered into the land of Canaan and was translated. And he will return with all the saints, including Father Adam, at the final coming of Christ. And Adam, he actually can be thought of as the final chiasmus. Now, all of these have another section here, and it's what happens if you ever turn against it. You got the Mormon and Moroni chapters, right? If you ever turn against, after having something like this, then you're going to be completely destroyed. Same for us, you become son of perdition. These are all kind of linked up now with the second coming, and there is a Mormon and Moroni section that after 1,000 years, the people, many become wicked again, and there's the final battle of Gog and Magog, where Satan is loose for a little season. He gathers his armies, and then Michael, Adam, the seventh angel, even the archangel, shall gather together his armies. And the devil gathers his, and they come to battle against Michael. The battle of the great God, the devil and his army shall be cast away into their own place. Michael will fight their battles. He is the one that has the final say, which is awesome because it's one more piece of the puzzle with the chiasmus. It actually really starts and ends with Adam. And it kind of goes through the whole thing. So just awesome correlations in the scriptures. I just want to finish up real quick with some housekeeping items of the last days, I guess. So I had shared this dream in my first video. Kind of the gist was that I saw Trump in my dream as a cowboy. He was being chased by bandits. He takes the high ground and he gives a signal to go after his pursuers, and they start taking them out. And as he does so, a landslide starts and kind of sweeps everyone down over the cliff. So right after I published my last video, like I think it was like the next day or two, just a few days later, this came out. I mean, you think of the Super Bowl example, just coming out at the last second with a Hail Mary. The Biden laptop. If you have heard anything about this, I think everyone has. But wow, he forgets his laptop at a computer repair shop. It has damning emails and photos and whatnot. He sees that these emails implicate Joe Biden and Hunter Biden in these deals with Russia and China and Ukraine. The store owner delivers it to the FBI in December, who also have another computer apparently, and nothing happens. They just sit on it. That's interesting. So he had made a copy, and he delivers it to the New York Post and Rudy Giuliani, who ran the story mid-October, right before the second debate. Twitter and Facebook came out. They actively tried to block it. The left labeled it as Russian disinformation and looked to label this guy, a business partner of the Bidens, Mr. Bobulinski, as the scapegoat. He, who, by the way, is a Navy veteran and a Democrat, tries to get out in front of it, providing phones, emails, text messages, everything that he can to the authorities to clear his name and implicate that this is kind of the Biden show. Wow. I mean, yeah, talk about, a divine intervention last minute that may sway the election. I think this was huge. The scripture comes to mind, they shall war among themselves, and the sword of their own hands shall fall upon their own heads. It just sounds like that. This isn't something he wanted to do. He feels like he is at risk, and he should. Hunter Biden is under criminal investigation for money laundering now, and this was interesting. Some incriminating files disappeared from Fox and then magically reappeared. Tony Bobulinski, he was talking to Rob Walker, who's associated with the Bidens. He said, if he doesn't come out on record, I am providing the facts. And he says, Tony, be reasonable. You're just going to bury all of us, man. Well, if you don't have something to hide, then why are you worried about being buried? Interesting. There's just one of the emails from, this is a guy from Burisma, Ukraine. Said, thank you for inviting me to D.C. and giving me an opportunity to meet your father. I thought Biden never talked to Hunter's business associates over there. Interesting. This came out right before the second debate, which most declared Trump as the winner. A lot happened there. There was a trending, can I change my vote after. So this just kind of, to me is signs of God being in the mix, and this is an eternal game of chess. So it's election night right now, if you're watching this the first day. I don't know what's going to happen tonight. I suspect that it will look like Trump has won by tonight, but in the next few days, with the tallying up of all the mail-in votes and the extra ones that they find in the key swing states, it will likely look miraculously like Biden wins. Either way, I don't see that either is going to concede victory to the other. Clinton has already said Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances, and this is setting the whole thing up for a Supreme Court vote, which now is in conservative hands thanks to the last divine intervention, where the RBG was switched with the ACB. Hopefully you know what that means. And basically, this secret combination that is running America knows this. They know they're out of options. We've seen the Trump, he's definitely got ammo to go after, even if, Biden wins. I would think that there's so much here to implicate him in a criminal investigation that, I don't know, can you nominate a criminal as the president of America? I wouldn't think so. Anyway, Deep State knows this. They know they're out of options, and they have to trigger the landslide, which we've already started to see hints of that with the stock market. Honestly, I thought it would be worse. We're just kind of seeing, a downtrend in the stock market, which I think is going to get a lot worse. Starting today, most likely, with whatever happens with this election. Honestly, I've never seen so much hate and polarization, even among church members. Like, you share your opinion about Trump, and church members that are Democrat come out and jump down your throat, and vice versa. And also this, they're already starting to deliver pallets of bricks in many of the major Democrat cities. There are multiple, even in some of the smaller cities. They're finding pallets of bricks. That seemed to happen over the summer as well. Seems like someone above the ridge is starting to push boulders. Guess we will see. So, no matter what happens, I choose to have more faith in the prophecy of Ezra, i.e. Ezra's eagle, than I do in what the left's trying to do. Ezra was and is a prophet of God, and he said straight up that the first feather on the right side, the same side that thought to set up themselves and to have rule, would be short. He said, I beheld, and lo, there was one set up, but shortly it appeared no more. This matches perfectly with Helaman 1, where Pahoran was appointed by the voice of the people, and then Paankai sought to flatter away those people to rise up in rebellion. Sounds familiar? And he was taken and tried, but then his supporters were angry, and behold, they sent forth one Kishkumen into the judgment seat of Pahoran, and murdered Pahoran as he sat upon the judgment seat. So no matter which way this goes, I choose to have faith that this is how it's going to play out. I don't particularly have a ton of love for Trump necessarily. I think he's trying to do the best with what he's got, but I do believe he will be set up as the president, and he will become a short feather following. So, back to the timeline, because I like talking about the timeline. We know kind of the basic gist, or at least I think I know. The silence has ended or is ending. That is followed by an earthquake in Revelation and Angels 1 through 4. This is followed by a 5-month civil war, which I believe is likely this December, which is correlated with the taking away of the daily sacrifice on December 18th. And you got the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on the 21st, and that all kind of leads to April 6, 2027. Well, interestingly enough, I found also that December 10th through the 18th is this Jewish holiday Chanukah, which commemorates the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem, which is interesting. Same day would be kind of marking the timeline that leads to the taking away of our temple with the abomination of desolation. It's kind of the gospel being taken from the Gentiles and brought to the Jews. And that seems significant. But I also find very remarkable is what happens just before December 18th on the 14th. There is another eclipse that hadn't been talked about too much until recently, and it just happens to be at the perfect midpoint of the 2 American eclipses that make the X across America. This Was noticed by this gentleman, Brian W., in his video. I suggest go to it. He has some awesome astronomy, and he's much better at creating slides, obviously, than I am. But he noted that between the two American eclipses, there is another eclipse exactly in the midpoint, and if you count the new moons, it's 42. There's that number 42, and there's even another one afterward, where there's an eclipse every 42 new moons, or if you actually count out the days, it's 1211. Well, actually, if you keep counting it out, and I'm not going to claim credit for this, this was brought up by some other individuals, if you keep counting it out, the pattern keeps repeating. And I just wanted to go through this. So this is the best I could do at trying to get all of these on one slide, so forgive the poor editing skills. But here we are, August 21st, 2017. Got the Great American Eclipse. It goes from west to east, and I actually don't know which directions these other ones go, but here's the next one, December 14th, 2020. Look how it starts over here, and actually it kind of starts right at the farthest islands in here. I think these are like Indonesia or something, but there's these far eastern islands that it starts at, and it goes all the way over to Africa. Huh. You've had one cross America, you've had one basically encompass the entire Western Hemisphere, all the way to the border of Africa. And now you've got this other one that comes back and crosses off America. This will be April 8th, 2024. And these are all exactly 1,211 days apart. 1,211 days later, you've got this one, August 2nd, 2027, that goes across the top of Africa, crosses right through the Red Sea and out here. And then the next one, November 25th, 2030, starts right where this one left off and goes all the way over to the tip of Africa, or Australia now. That's interesting. One more. March 20th, 2034 goes and makes an X. Where? Right over the Red Sea. The land of promise for the Israelites. You've got the two different, here's the first. We were the first to have the gospel, right? The first to become really wicked, and the first to inherit the covenant curses and subsequent promises upon being righteous. And here we are, the last to receive in the covenant curses and promises. And this was the best I could do at trying to do some photo editing, and it's not great. So if anyone has a good map maker that can do this, feel free to share. But here they are. You've got 2017, 2027, 2024, 2034, 2020, 2030. Wow. And the Lord crossing off eclipses are not good, remember? He is crossing off the wicked in America from the west all the way to the east. And then he does the same thing here from their western border all the way to their eastern border. This is the most amazing celestial sign I have ever seen. It is just astounding. These just totally match up. And there's actually one more that is another 1,211 days, 42 moons, that goes basically from Australia over to here, so it all kind of connects, but couldn't fit it. Wow. Yeah, so sun shall be darkened. What about the stars falling? December 14th is also the peak of the Geminid meteor shower. And don't forget about the 17th of November being the Leonids. This is the meteor shower in Joseph Smith's time, November 13th, where they thought the sky was falling. There were so many. So, yeah, don't count either of those out for fulfilling Revelation 8, where, the first angel sounds, and hail and fire mingles with blood comes, and then the second angel sounds, and the great mountain burning with fire cast into the sea. Remember, in D&C 29 it says, before the great day of the coming of the Lord shall come, the sun shall be darkened. Okay, yep, we're seeing that. The moon shall be turned to blood, and the stars shall fall from heaven. Okay, well, here's some options for the stars falling from heaven. That's 2 out of 3, but what about the moon? Well, November 30th. There is a total lunar eclipse, and it stretches from Russia. Look at that, it just barely includes almost all of Russia there, all the way to the eastern border of America. You couldn't, look at that, it's just perfect. Follows Florida all the way up here through South Carolina, New York, Maine. This is a sign of the times as well. The moon shall be turned to blood. So here's your last day's celestial signs checklist. Starting with November 3rd, contested election, followed by the signs. November 17th is the Leonid meteor shower. November 30th, America's lunar eclipse, the blood moon, which is actually right in the middle between the meteor showers, that one and that one. December 18th will be the lower American hemisphere eclipse and the Geminid meteor shower. And December 18th, which is the last day of Chanukah, which celebrates the coming Jewish temple and represents the taking away of the daily sacrifices, which is a foreboding of the loss of our temple in 1290 days with the abomination of desolation, basically signifying the day of the Gentiles is over and it's being taken to Israel. And then December 21st, there's that winter equinox, Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the harvest beginning. Okay, we are almost done. So the final second coming, we talked about how if you add the 2300 Daniel days to December 18th, you end up on April 6, 2027. But when would the final second coming be? Well, that's the one that no one knows. And people kind of get mad and say, no one knows the day or the hour. And you're right. No one knows the day or the hour of the actual second coming. But, doesn't say that we can't put 2 and 2 together and have an idea of some of his other comings. But there could be a hint here in Ezekiel 39:9. And they that dwell in the cities of Israel shall go forth after the battle of Armageddon, and they shall set on fire and burn the weapons, both the shields and the bucklers, and the bows and the arrows, and the handstaves and the spears, burn them with fire 7 years. So why in the world would they need to go clean up the land for 7 years? If, I should have done better proofreading, Christ comes in his glory and transfigures the earth. Wouldn't that kind of clean it all up for him? Well, maybe because there's 7 years from when he comes in 2027 to when he comes the final time, which would put you right at 2034, which is the last eclipse on March 20th, 2034. And that would be this one here, the final crossing off of the promised land there. And April 6th of that year is a Passover. Just saying. Interesting. Okay, this has been fun. I hope I haven't bored you to tears. let's remember what our prophet said, and let God prevail in our lives individually, because we know that He will prevail on a global, worldwide basis. Our prophet taught that the Lord loveth those who will have Him to be their God. Behold, He loved our fathers, and He covenanted with them, yea, even Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And He remembers the covenants which He has made. And what is the Lord willing to do for Israel? The Lord has pledged that He will fight our battles and our children's battles, and our children's battles to the third and fourth generation. And I failed to mention this earlier, but I felt impressed just now to just say that this allegory idea of everything matching up, to me, other than my own personal witness of the Book of Mormon, is the greatest witness and testimony of the Book of Mormon, that it is true. Joseph Smith, as a 20-something-year-old with a third grade education, wrote this book, right, or translated this book in a little over 60 working days. To be able to get this to correlate with both past history and future history, as well as our own personal timeline in such a degree, I don't even think he recognized, maybe he probably did, but certainly hasn't been widely taught, just how beautiful that this all matches up. Joseph Smith was a prophet. The Book of Mormon is true. I absolutely know that. This is not a coincidence, and it's all leading up and teaching us both what we need to be doing on an individual basis and what we can be expecting on a national basis as a church. And just want to leave that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.